Howdy guys, it's Joe here, and here we are again to talk a little bit about Overwatch, and today we're talking a bit about, the 5 differences between good and bad tank players. Now, by saying this, I'm not calling you a horrible tank player if you don't do these things already, but what I am saying is that you can improve by, trying to do some of these good things, some of these good habits, or just trying to think about your tank play and try to improve that way. Anyways, though, of course, I've been seeing a lot of these, tips, a lot of these habits happening in the pro scene, a lot of these tips happening in, the upper levels, so I'd recommend that you at least try these out for yourself and try to apply them to yourself. Anyways, with that said, let's go on to the 5th tip, and that 5th tip is one that I feel like really isn't seen way too often, especially at lower level, and even at my level that I'm at, I barely ever see this, and that is when you are playing a tank, you should try to know when to take damage on purpose. Now, that's a really weird statement. Why would you ever want to, just randomly walk up and take damage? Let's say, for example, you're playing Reinhardt. When should you just walk up without your shield up and take a little bit of damage from the opponents, maybe 100, 200, 300 damage? Well, when you should be doing this is when you have a support on your team that has a very high impact ult, like, Zenyatta, like, Anna, Mercy, someone like that. There's a lot of situations where, Junkrat's just spamming on a corner, and sometimes you will actually want to walk up and take some damage. Now, you are charging the enemy's ult, but at the same time, you're also charging your support's ult. And for the most part, support's ults are super good, super strong, and they, of course, charge very, very fast. You can just run in there, take out the enemy team, and get a really nice push. And, of course, a really nice thing about this is that if you are purposely taking some damage, and your other tank as well is purposely taking a little bit of poke damage, your support is going to get their ult much, much faster than the enemy support. And this is a really nice thing, as if your supports had their ult really early, you could have maybe a revive ready, you could have maybe an Ana ult ready, you can go in really early compared to the enemy team, and while they may have an attack damage ult, for a lot of the times, these ults, these support ults, do beat out most of those ults. For example, if the Genji has their ult, but your team's playing pretty defensively, pretty close together, and then you send in a Reinhardt that, takes out the backline of their team, you're probably going to win that fight, and you're probably going to do very well. So do try to learn when to make your tanks take a little bit of damage. And of course, for the 3-man support and the 3-man tank, this applies even more. Try to take quite a bit of damage, have your Ana heal you, and get that ult really quick. Now to my next, and I guess the 4th tip is know when to go for picks. Now, I feel like this is a little bit of, a counterintuitive thing. When you're playing most of the tanks, you don't really think about going for picks unless you're playing someone like Roadhog. But honestly, this is one of the things that can be very, very good about the tanks. A lot of the tanks in this game simply have very high damage output, and if you can know when to actually use that damage output on the enemy, it's a really good idea. And it really kind of, strengthens you as a tank and makes you a lot more useful as a tank player if you can actually kill some of the enemies. Now, of course, you won't always be able to get picks, but often you'll see either just someone by themselves. Let's say you see a Genji trying to flank around. You could just walk around, get back to him, and actually try to take him out, as most tanks can. Now, of course, with this said, you shouldn't always go for picks. You shouldn't always go for these things. But if you never really go for picks as it is right now, if you're always just that Reinhardt that just always continuously holds right click, maybe let it go sometimes, go for a few kills, and then jump back to helping your team, as that'll help them quite a bit more than if you're just 100% always defending, which can be very counterable. Now, as the 3rd thing, I'm also going to say, don't overextend way too much at the first sight of a promising kill. Now, this is kind of opposite of the previous thing. There are some tank players that really, they don't really go for that many picks, but on the other side of the spectrum, there's a lot of tank players that just, when they see someone at low HP, they're going in for that kill, and they go way too ham for that promise of maybe getting a kill. Now, of course, you can really often see this with Winston and with a lot of Zarya. You see these characters jumping in by themselves. Let's say, once again, there's like a Genji or a Tracer running back to their team. You see them on very low health. You try to go after them. You try to take them out. And then you happen to just walk a little bit too far and kill yourself. When you're going for someone, when you're trying to chase someone down, do make sure where your team is. Try to know where they're at and try to know what they're doing. If no one's behind you, you should probably just turn around and just wait. And as well, if someone's already very, very close to their spawn, you probably shouldn't run towards them and try to kill them, especially if you're on an attack defense map, as they're just going to respawn quickly, and you do have to actually risk the chance of dying with your longer respawn because you have to walk further to get back to the cart. So I would say play it a little bit more defensively if you always go in, and realize just don't really overextend way too much. You are, of course, the tank. You do need to protect your team, and that's just one of your main functions. So do go for some kills, but don't go for all of them. Now, as far as the second thing that I want to say is that you also should probably know when to switch to another tank, and you should probably learn at least 2 to 3 tanks. And this is the thing that I really see a lot of people having a problem with. They're, just playing mainly one tank. Let's say that they play only Roadhog, let's say that they play only Zarya. A lot of the times, one tank doesn't fit every situation. Let's say that you're even a Reinhardt main, who you just say would usually work for most situations. If you're playing on a King of the Hill map, Reinhardt, while still okay, it's not really that great, to be honest, and a lot of the times it would be better to pick someone like a Winston, pick better someone like a Diva, maybe even if you pick a Zarya, someone like that. there's a lot of different choices in the tanks, and you should try to learn them all, or at least try to get good at 2 or 3. Now, I'd recommend that you probably learn someone like Zarya or Roadhog as your, damage dealing tank, and then learn someone like D.Va or like Reinhardt for a little bit more defensive, a bit more of a wall. D.Va's a little bit offensive, but, kind of wally. And then I also recommend probably just everyone try to learn a bit of Winston. Of course, he isn't the best right now, but you can easily dive into the enemy's backline, and he is very different from all the other tanks. So if you can happen to learn 2, maybe even 3 tanks, you're going to be a lot better in a lot more team compositions. And if you're doing really badly in a game, don't really worry and actually try to switch out your tank. I feel like a lot of times people are like, I have like 15, I have 20% charges as Zarya ult, I probably shouldn't switch. Or even at sometimes you're like, I have 60% as my Zarya ult, I probably shouldn't switch. But sometimes if you really know that the enemy team is going to die to a Winston, and you're decent as Winston, switch to Winston. Take the switch and just switch up your characters. Now, of course, with that, don't switch all the time to another tank, but don't be afraid of switching, and do try to learn some more tanks, as having a variety of tanks that you can play is very, very useful to your team comp. And as far as the final thing is a very simple fact, but something that I feel like a lot of people have a big problem with, including myself quite often, is that when you're playing a tank, and this especially applies to someone like Winston, someone like, Zarya, even D.Va, when you're playing a tank, actually try to wait for your team and try to group up your team. And this might even be if your team keeps killing themselves. Wait, group them up, and then go in as a team. For the most part, tanks are a lot better as a team. They're a lot better pretty much just with other people helping them. Tanks, of course, block a lot of damage for their team, and they do supply a decent amount themselves. But if you are going in with your team, you're obviously going to be doing a lot better. So I'd say just wait. Don't be way too stubborn. Don't get stubborn and decide, I'm going to go in 1v6. My team is retarded. They're just going in, killing themselves. Don't. Wait for your team. Maybe even only 3 or 4 members if no one's grouping up. Just wait until they happen to respawn at the same time. Try to go in together and try to do very well with that. Tanks are just really amazing with your team. And of course, as well, if someone's in voice chat, just tell your team, please wait for me. After you die, let's wait up. Let's group up. Get all 6 man together, because obviously in this game, you do a lot better when you have your full team up. I don't really know exactly why, but it just happens to be that when you have a full team of 6, you do better than when you trickle in 1 by 1. So I'd say that. Wait for your team, and don't get a little... And do be a little bit patient. Of course, the tank role, you do have to be kind of patient with. Of course, you do kind of have to wait for some of your people to carry you with a little bit on your team, as you don't have the most damage, unless you're playing someone like Zarya. But do be a little bit patient and give your teammates a chance, and you never really know what they're going to do. And they might just surprise you in how well they're doing. You never really know. Anyways, thank you guys for watching. Tell me what you guys think are, some big differences between a good and a bad tank player. I kind of want to know your own opinions in the comment section down below. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, do leave a like. Press that subscribe button if you want any more tips. And also tell me down below if you want any more videos like this, like the 5 different tips between good and bad offense players, good and bad flankers, good and bad supports, all these different videos. I'd be very happy to make those, research on those and create them. Anyways, thank you all for watching. And as always, have a wonderful day.